I want you to think about the person you trust most in this world, the person who knows your coffee order, who knows which side of the bed you sleep on, who knows every scar on your body and every fear in your heart. Now imagine following that person on a Friday night. Imagine sitting in your car, 2 blocks away, watching them walk into a restaurant, a nice one, candles on the tables, the kind of place they stopped taking you to years ago. And then imagine watching them sit down across from a woman who is not you, watching him reach across the table and take her hand, watching him smile at her. That smile, your smile, the one you thought belonged to you. My name is Emily. I am 31 years old, and that Friday night in October, sitting alone in my car in the dark, watching my husband of 6 years hold another woman's hand, that was the night my entire life cracked open. Stay with me. Because what happened after that night, that is a story I have never told anyone. Until right now. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel James Carter, 6'1", dark hair, green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed. He was the kind of man who held doors open, not because someone taught him to, but because it genuinely never occurred to him not to. He was thoughtful, funny in this quiet, unexpected way that always caught me off guard. He remembered things, small things, the kind of things most people let slip. He remembered that I hated cilantro, that I cried every single time I watched the ending of Toy Story 3, that I needed exactly 8 minutes of silence in the morning before I was ready to talk to anyone. We met when I was 24. A mutual friend's birthday party in Columbus. Crowded apartment, bad music. Someone had made a truly terrible punch. I was standing near the window trying to get some air, and Daniel appeared beside me and said very seriously, "I think someone put fruit punch mix and regret in that bowl." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. We talked for 4 hours that night. Just the two of us, in a corner of that noisy apartment, while the party moved around us like we were a still point in the middle of a storm. He texted me the next morning. Not that night. The next morning, he said, "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I have 3 follow-up questions." And he listed them. Actually numbered them. 1, 2, 3. I remember thinking, this man is different. We dated for 2 years. Careful, wonderful years where we learned each other slowly, the way you're supposed to. We got engaged on a Tuesday, not a holiday, not a special occasion, just a Tuesday evening in our kitchen when he looked at me over the dinner he'd cooked and said, "I don't want to do this without you. Any of it. Ever." And he pulled out a ring. We got married on a Saturday in June. Outdoor ceremony, string lights, my mother crying from the first note of the processional. I walked down that aisle and Daniel was standing at the end of it and his eyes were wet and his hands were shaking slightly and I thought, this is it. This is the safest place in the world. For 4 years I was right. And then, slowly, quietly, in ways I kept explaining away, things started to change. It didn't happen overnight. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in. It borrows your husband's face and your marriage's furniture, and it moves in so slowly that by the time you notice, it's been living there for months. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Daniel had always been relaxed about his phone. Casual. He'd leave it on the counter, forget it in the car, hand it to me to look something up without a second thought. But sometime around the beginning of last year, that changed. The phone started coming everywhere with him. To the bathroom, to bed, face down on the nightstand. He started angling it away slightly when he typed. I noticed. I told myself I was being paranoid. The second thing was Friday nights. It started in January. He came home one Friday and said his company had launched a new project, a big one, and the team was putting in extra hours. Friday nights specifically because the client was on the East Coast and the time zone worked better. He'd be home by 10, maybe 11. I believed him. Of course I believed him. Why wouldn't I? The first Friday, he came home at 10:30, smelling like cologne. His cologne, I told myself. The second Friday at 11. By March, he was coming home after midnight, sometimes closer to 1. Always tired, always a little distant, always with a version of the same story. Long night, big project. I'm exhausted. I made his dinners and kept them warm. I stayed up waiting. I told myself this was what marriage looked like in the hard seasons. You show up, you support each other, you get through it. The third thing, and this one cut the deepest, though I didn't let myself feel it at the time, was the way he stopped looking at me. Not obviously, not cruelly, just the quality of his attention changed. When I talked, he listened, but his eyes were somewhere else. When I reached for his hand in the car, he took it, but it felt like reflex. We still had dinners and conversations and even good days. But underneath everything, there was this new distance. Like he had moved one step back from me and I couldn't figure out how to close the gap. I asked him once, a Wednesday night in September, sitting on the couch after dinner, I said, "Is everything okay with us?" He looked at me and he said, "Of course. I'm just tired, Emily. The project is a lot right now." He said it so simply, so steadily. He looked me right in the eyes. I believed him. I hate that I believed him. It was the second Friday in October. The leaves were changing. That beautiful, melancholy Ohio autumn that always makes me feel something I can't quite name. Daniel came home from work at 6, changed his shirt, and said the team needed him in early tonight. Something about a presentation. He kissed me on the cheek, not the mouth, I noticed, and he left. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment after his car pulled out, and something shifted in me. Something quiet and certain. Not panic, not yet. Just a very still, very clear voice somewhere deep inside that said, "Follow him." I had never done anything like that before. I was not a suspicious person. I was not the kind of woman who checked phones or asked for passwords. I believed in trust. I built my marriage on trust. But that voice. I grabbed my keys. I kept 2 blocks back the whole way. I had no idea what I was doing. I had never followed anyone in my life. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my heart was doing something strange and irregular in my chest. He didn't go to his office building. He drove 20 minutes across town to a neighborhood I knew slightly. Nicer restaurants, wine bars, the kind of street where couples go for date night. He parked on a side street. I parked behind a row of cars where I could see him, but he couldn't see me. He got out of the car. He had changed his shirt. I realized it then. He had come home and changed into a blue button-down I recognized, one I always said looked good on him. He had put on cologne. He was walking with energy, not the tired shuffle he brought home to me every night. He was walking like a man who was excited to be somewhere. I watched him walk into a restaurant called Marigold. Warm lighting in the windows, small candles on every table. I sat in my car. 5 minutes passed. 10. I don't know what I was waiting for. Permission, maybe. Or proof that I was wrong. I was desperately hoping I was wrong. I got out of the car. I walked to the restaurant window, and I looked inside. Daniel was sitting at a table near the back. He was leaning forward slightly. That posture I knew, the one he had when he was really engaged in a conversation, when something had his full attention. Across from him was a woman. She was maybe my age, maybe a little younger. Dark hair, nice dress, a glass of red wine in front of her. She was laughing at something he said, and then he reached across the table, and he took her hand. I don't remember deciding to walk back to my car. I just found myself there. Sitting in the driver's seat, engine off, the street quiet around me, the autumn leaves moving slightly in the wind. I sat there for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. Not yet. I think I was too shocked to cry. I just sat there while the world rearranged itself into a shape I didn't recognize. When I finally drove home, I went straight to bed. I lay in the dark and I stared at the ceiling and I listened to the clock on the nightstand. Daniel came home at 12:30. I heard him come in, move through the house, brush his teeth. He got into bed beside me. He said softly, "Hey, you awake?" I said, "No." He was asleep in 10 minutes. I was awake until 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, lying next to a stranger. The hardest part, and I know this might sound strange, the hardest part wasn't what I saw. It was the days after. Living normally, making coffee in the morning, asking how his day was, sitting across from him at dinner and watching his mouth move and thinking, I know, I know, I know. I needed to be sure before I said anything. I needed more than what I had seen. Because what if there was an explanation? What if she was a colleague? What if I had misread it? I knew I hadn't misread it, but I needed to know everything before I blew up my life. So I started paying attention differently. I started noticing the timing of his texts. Late at night, he'd smile at his phone and then set it face down. I noticed he started showering immediately when he got home on Fridays, before we even spoke. I noticed he had started being almost aggressively nice to me, bringing me flowers one week, suggesting a weekend trip the next. The kind of overcorrection that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. Guilt looks a lot like love if you don't know what you're looking for. I checked our phone bill, something I had access to. Nothing invasive, just our shared account. I found a number that appeared over and over, dozens of times, morning, afternoon, late at night, a number not saved in my contacts. I wrote it down. I sat with it for 3 days, and then one afternoon, while Daniel was at work, I called it. It rang twice. A woman answered. She said, "Hey, I was just thinking about you." And then she stopped because she heard my silence, and she knew. I said very quietly, "This is Emily, Daniel's wife." The line went completely silent. I said, "I think you know why I'm calling." And she hung up. He came home that evening at 6:15, normal time. He had his work bag over his shoulder, and he was looking at his phone as he came through the door. And then he looked up and saw me. I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded. No dinner cooking, no TV on, just me and the silence and the phone bill on the table in front of me. He knew immediately. I could see it, this flash of something across his face. Not surprise exactly, more like a man who has been waiting for a door to open and finally hears the handle turn. He said, "Emily," I said, "Sit down, Daniel." He sat. I slid the phone bill across the table. I said, "I want you to tell me who this number belongs to." He looked at it. He was quiet for a long moment. And then he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him, "Her name is Rachel." The room tilted slightly. I said, "How long?" He said, "Emily, I said, "How long, Daniel?" He closed his eyes. He said, 8 months. 8 months. I did the math immediately, involuntarily. 8 months meant January. 8 months meant the very first Friday he came home late. 8 months meant every "I'm exhausted" and every cheek kiss and every overcorrected bouquet of flowers. 8 months of my life that I had been living inside a lie. I stood up. I walked to the window. I stood there with my back to him for a long time because I needed a moment, just one moment, to hold myself together. Then I turned around. I said, "I followed you 3 weeks ago. I saw you at Marigold. I saw you hold her hand." He put his face in his hands. I said, "I called her today." She answered, thinking I was you. He said nothing. I said, "I need you to leave this house tonight. I need you to pack a bag and go. And tomorrow we will figure out what happens next. But tonight, I cannot be in the same room as you." He looked up at me and his eyes were wet. He said, "Emily, I am so sorry. I never meant." I said, "Please don't. Please, Daniel, not tonight." He left an hour later. I sat on the kitchen floor, actually on the floor, and I cried until I had nothing left. The weeks after Daniel left were the strangest of my life. Strange because from the outside, nothing looked different. I still went to work. I still answered emails. I still ran errands and made grocery lists and responded to text messages. I kept functioning because functioning felt safer than stopping, because if I stopped, I would have to feel all of it, and all of it was enormous. I told my best friend, Jess. She drove over that same night and sat with me on the kitchen floor, literally on the floor, and she didn't say, "I told you so," even though she had, gently, once, about a year earlier, mentioned that something seemed off. She just sat beside me and let me fall apart. I told my mom a week later. That conversation was its own kind of grief. Hearing my mother's voice go quiet on the phone, hearing her try to hold her anger together for my sake. She wanted to drive down immediately. I told her I needed a few days first. What I was not prepared for was the way the betrayal lived in my body. Not just in my thoughts, in my actual body. I stopped sleeping properly. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding like I'd been running. I stopped eating real meals. Not intentionally, I just forgot. I'd stand in the kitchen and open the refrigerator and close it again without taking anything. I'd find myself crying in completely random moments. In my car, at a red light, in the shower, once very unexpectedly in the cereal aisle at the grocery store. Because we'd had a brand we always bought together and I saw it on the shelf and just completely fell apart in aisle 7. Grief for a living person is a specific kind of strange. Daniel wasn't gone. He was 20 minutes away in an apartment he had rented quickly, sending me careful, formal texts about logistics. He was alive and existing in the world. But the person I had believed he was, the man at the birthday party with his 3 follow-up questions, the man whose hands shook at our wedding, that person felt gone, and I had to grieve him without a funeral. 3 weeks after Daniel left, I got a message from Rachel. I had not expected that. I had convinced myself she had nothing to say to me, or nothing I wanted to hear. But her message was long, careful. She said she had not known he was married at first, that by the time she found out, she was already in it, and she had made choices she was not proud of. She said she was not asking for forgiveness. She just thought I deserved the full truth. What she told me next reordered everything. It hadn't been 8 months. It had been 14. He had met Rachel at a work conference almost a year before the Friday night started. The early months were, according to her, just texting, and I almost laughed at that, because that is such a precise and familiar kind of self-deception. And then she told me something else, something that sat in my chest like a stone for days afterward. She told me that 2 months before, I found out, so about 6 weeks before that October Friday, Daniel had told her he was going to leave me, that he had been planning to ask for a divorce after the holidays, that he had already spoken to a lawyer. While I was making his dinners and keeping them warm, while I was lying awake, worrying about the distance between us and wondering what I could do differently, while I was trying harder, loving louder, showing up, he had already spoken to a lawyer. I sat with Rachel's message for a long time. Then I called my own attorney. I want to be honest about something. The decision to file for divorce was not a single dramatic moment. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was quieter than that, and in some ways, harder. Because even after everything, there was a part of me that had loved Daniel for 6 years, And that part did not disappear overnight. But I had a conversation with my mom that changed something in me. She drove down the weekend after I found out the full truth. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had confronted Daniel, and she held my hands across it and she said, "Emily, you did not fail this marriage. You showed up every single day. What failed was his character, and you cannot fix another person's character." I wrote that down. I put it on a note card on my bathroom mirror. You cannot fix another person's character. I filed for divorce on a Monday morning in November. My attorney, a woman named Christine Walsh, direct and calm and absolutely in my corner. She walked me through every step. The asset division, the shared accounts, the house we had been renting together. Daniel did not fight it. I think, on some level, he was relieved that I was the one moving things forward. That was very Daniel, letting someone else carry the hardest part. We had one meeting, just us, no attorneys, at a coffee shop that was neutral territory. He was thinner. He looked tired in a way that was different from the Friday night tired, genuinely hollowed out. He said, "I am sorry, Emily. I know that doesn't fix anything." I said, "No, it doesn't, but I hear you." That was the last real conversation we had. I walked out of that coffee shop into a cold November afternoon, and I stood on the sidewalk and I breathed in the sharp, cold air, and I thought, okay, I am still standing. I am still here. And I am going to be okay. People ask me now, months later, when did it start to get better? And I always say the same thing. It didn't start with a moment. It started with a decision. The decision to stop shrinking. Because here is what I realized. Sitting alone in that house in those early weeks, I had been making myself smaller for a long time, not dramatically, not in ways I even noticed. But slowly, quietly, I had been rearranging myself around Daniel's moods and Daniel's needs and Daniel's comfort. I had been so focused on keeping the peace, keeping him happy, keeping us working, that I had stopped keeping myself. I started therapy in December. A therapist named Dr. Anita Moore, patient, honest, not afraid to ask the hard questions. She asked me once, "What did you want before Daniel? What did Emily want?" I sat there for a long moment, and I realized I couldn't remember. So I started remembering. I had wanted to travel. Daniel had always said someday, and someday never came. I booked a trip to Portugal for February, solo, terrifying, the best 11 days of my life. I had wanted to take a photography class. I signed up in January. I was terrible at first. I got better. I am still getting better. I started having Sunday dinners with my mom and my aunt and my best friend Jess. Every single Sunday. No cancellations, a standing date. Those Sunday dinners became the most important hours of my week. I started laughing again. Not forced laughter, real laughter, the kind that surprises you. And slowly, the way spring comes so gradually you can't point to the exact moment, I started feeling like myself again. Not the self I was before Daniel. Better than that, actually. A version of me that had been through something and survived it and come out the other side knowing exactly how strong she is. I have thought a lot about why I'm telling this story. Because it's not easy to tell. It requires me to admit that I was deceived by the person I trusted most, and there is still, even now, a small voice that asks if I should have seen it sooner. But here is what I know. I did nothing wrong. I loved my husband faithfully and fully. I showed up. I tried. I trusted. And trust is not a weakness. Trust is what love is made of. The fact that he broke it says everything about him and nothing about me. If you are sitting somewhere right now recognizing your own life in what I just described, the late nights, the shifted phone, the distance that appeared like fog and never quite lifted, I want to say something directly. Trust yourself. That quiet voice that said something is wrong. It was right. It is almost always right. We spend so much energy talking ourselves out of our own instincts because the truth is too painful to face. But the truth, as painful as it is survivable. I promise you, it is survivable. You are not paranoid. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much by wanting a partner who is fully present and fully honest. And you are not finished, whatever stage you are in right now. The suspicion, the discovery, the aftermath, the rebuilding, you are not finished. There is more of your story left to write. And the chapters ahead of you, I cannot tell you exactly what they hold, but I can tell you this. The version of me that sat in that car on a Friday night in October, watching her husband hold someone else's hand. My name is Emily. I am 31 years old. I followed my husband on a Friday night and my world fell apart. And then, slowly, imperfectly, stubbornly, I put it back together. Thank you so much for being here with me today. If this story touched you, please share it, because somewhere out there is a woman who needs to hear that she is not alone. And she is not crazy, and she is going to be okay. Take care of yourselves.